Let's investigate monthly payment, and total interest on a fixed rate mortgage. So you have $250,000 fixed rate mortgage. So we have an APR, a present value, that's the loan amount, and then a total amount of time, so 30 years in this case. It is entirely possible that you have a loan for or a mortgage for a different period of time, but 30 years is pretty standard. So let's go to the TVM solver. We click apps and then enter for finance, enter for TVM solver. In this case, 30 years, we got 30, but we're making monthly payments and there's going to be monthly compounds on our interest. So 30 times 12. Our interest percent would be 3.725. That's going to stay the same the whole time. That's the idea of a fixed rate mortgage. Our present value is $250,000. And our future value should be 0. We're going to pay this down to 0. So we were given $250,000 to buy this house essentially, and we're going to have to pay it back. So payment is what we're interested in. Payments per year, compounds per year, those should both be 12. Those last three items would tend to be pretty standard for all of these finance problems. So let's solve for PMT, for payment. So hit alpha and then enter. And this is going to show up as a negative if our present value was positive. So they gave us this money, the bank gave us this money to purchase the house. We have to pay it back. So the directionality of the money is changing here. So we have $1,154. And if we're rounding up, we could say 25 cents. Of course, the fact that this is not a perfectly round decimal might change some of our other calculations, so just keep that in mind. Okay, how much do we pay in total during the life of the mortgage? There are a couple ways to calculate this, but probably the easiest one is to take the amount that we got in Part A and say, well, I'm making that payment every month, and I'm doing that over the course of 30 years. And that will give us some total amount. So let's get out of the TVM solver and we can put in our monthly payment, $1,154.25, and we can say times 12 times 30. So in total, it looks like we have paid $415,530. So this amount should be more than the amount that we borrowed because we have to pay it back. We have to pay back that initial $250,000, but we're also paying interest on it. So oftentimes the amount that you pay for your mortgage is nearly double what the initial amount was. And that's kind of the idea, the importance behind maybe paying a little bit extra if you can, paying ahead on that loan. Okay, so how much interest did we pay during the life of the mortgage? Well, there are a couple ways to solve this as well. I'm going to show us two ways. One is just to use what we already have. So in Part B, we calculated that the total amount that we paid was $415,530. If we subtract the $250,000 that the loan, the original mortgage, the loan was for, the only thing that's different between how much we borrowed and how much we actually paid would be all of our interest. So if we take the value that we paid in total and just subtract 250,000, that's going to give us the interest. So $165,530 in interest. That's a lot of money in interest, but you have to understand we also borrowed a big chunk of money and we're accruing interest on these payments over the course of 30 years. So there is going to be quite a bit of interest paid here. Now, there's another way to do this with our calculator, which is to go into apps, click on finance, but instead of going to the TVM solver, we're going to scroll down. So we're going to scroll down until we see int, int. Now before that is a sigma, that just means the sum of. So the sum of all the interest. So basically how much interest in total. So let's click enter on that. And it's going to ask us to input something here. So we want to find the interest from the first payment, so from payment 1, all the way through our final payment. So our last payment was 30 times 12, right? 360 payments later. So all of the interest from our first payment to our very last payment, 30 times 12, right? That's the number of months that we were paying off this mortgage. If we do that, we should get something fairly similar. Notice this is 165,000. Okay, that lines up. 500, that lines up. Oh, but 28 versus 30. Why are those different, right? Why are they slightly different numbers? That's because if we go back into the TVM solver, so apps, hit enter for finance, enter for solver, when we looked at our monthly payment, we said, okay, we're going to round this number here. So 1154.25. So we had to make a choice here to round because we're not going to keep going, right? I can't pay a fraction of a cent each month. But because we rounded, that means that any future calculations we make are going to be off just a little bit. So that's where we get this slight difference between what the sum of the interest calculates, which does account for those little fractions of a cent, versus our rounded version. Both of those, notice, we're talking about huge sums of money, and these differ by less than $2. So really, it's not a huge difference, but it is worth noting.